In April 2025, Marie Osmonds stopped using social media, although not for the anticipated reason. For more than a year, the 65-year-old celebrity has been subjected to harsh criticism over her appearance. When side-by-side images of her from the 1970s and 2024 went viral, many accused her of being a fraud. She denied significant surgery but acknowledged receiving some treatments. Experts, however, noted distinct modifications that were inexplicable. One of the greatest mysteries in Hollywood is what happened to Marie's face. Her metamorphosis is more stunning than anyone could have predicted. Marie Osmond was born on October 13, 1959 in Ogden, Utah. She was the family's lone daughter and the eighth of 9 children. However, her parents, George and Olive, were already feeling overburdened before she was born. Both of their sons were born totally deaf. Despite the doctor's advice not to have any more children, George and Olive felt that God intended them to. The risk was enormous. They lacked the funds to care for additional children with disabilities. It seemed miraculous that Marie was born healthy and with excellent hearing. She had normal hearing, as did the 5 younger boys who came after her. Her parents interpreted it as evidence that they had made the correct decision. The financial burden of having 2 deaf sons, however, never really went away. Marie's early years were not like those of other children. Her father was an Army veteran who operated their house more like a military installation. Strict regulations and music practices occupied her days by the time she was just 3 years old. They had to react like soldiers when her brother woke them up in the morning by playing the bugle. They were required to say yes or thank you during meals, and they faced consequences if they misbehaved. There was no playing outside, no rest, no true childhood. Since all Marie had ever known were practice scripts and more practice, she assumed that every family did this. Marie was learning Swedish songs for European tours while other children were learning to color. Her entire existence revolved around performance. The family was also having a lot of financial difficulties. Things grew so bad that they had to mortgage their farm and move to Los Angeles with no savings left in 1963, when Marie was only 5 years old. Her father's medical bills and failed businesses had cost him almost $25,000. That would be worth almost $200,000 now. Marie had to start performing in order to support them because they were broke and occasionally spent the night in their automobiles. She enjoyed singing, but she didn't do it. She sang because they wouldn't eat if she didn't. It's difficult to imagine a young girl being under that much pressure. Even before learning to read, she would later claim that she felt accountable for her entire family. In February 1964, she got her first significant break. When she made her appearance on The Andy Williams Show, she was just 4 years old. Behind the scenes, it was serious business, but most people found it cute. Marie was being tested to determine whether she might be included to her boy's 5-year contract, which was valued at about $50,000. In between rehearsals, she had to attend school classes, remember scripts she couldn't even read, and work 18-hour days. When she was just 4 years old, producers even made remarks about her weight. It was the start of her lifelong battle with body image. It was not a happy dream as a child. Marie was being treated more like a product than a child because it was a job. She was a regular on the show by 1967. Now that her entire family was participating, things began to shift. They began touring the world after landing a record deal with MGM. Donnie, Marie, and their younger brother Jimmy slept in the storage compartments of the trailer and traveled in small quarters. Marie was already managing money after performances and keeping track of ticket sales with her mother before she was even 10 years old. Before most children were permitted to cross the street by themselves, she had adult duties. The Osmonds' fame then skyrocketed in 1971. After their song One Bad Apple became a #1 hit, they found themselves suddenly wealthy. They purchased houses in California and Utah. Donnie even developed a secret room in his house with electronics that made his bed move like something out of a spy movie. However, not everything was joy. Their next spiritual CD failed by 1973, and the older brothers decided to play rock music instead. Donnie became the star with delicate songs like Puppy Love, and Marie was generally left out of the group's success. She was just viewed as the girl in a boy's household. She experienced that sense of exclusion for years. In August 1973, Marie's life took a drastic turn. Paper Roses, the first solo song she recorded, became an enormous smash. It was her 14th birthday. The song peaked at number 2 in the UK, number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, and number 1 on the country charts. More than 500,000 copies of her CD were sold. Though it had a cost, it was a dream come true. She was encouraged to appear older than she actually was by her record label. They picked tunes that didn't sound appropriate for a teenage girl, but rather for adults. She was forced into styles she didn't want by music producers. They recorded tunes that would appeal to older fans, even though Marie enjoyed country music. She was already being dragged away from her own voice at the age of 14. Then came 1974, the year that almost brought everything to an end. In order to promote her second album, In My Little Corner of the World, Marie had been performing constantly. Her voice began to falter. The doctors were taken aback. Even though she was just 15, years of stress were causing damage to her vocal cords that is often seen in adults. The family went into a panic when she had to cancel events. Without her voice, Marie's millions of dollars for the Osmond brand might have been lost. She can hardly sing in the footage from that era, and she tries not to cry while performing. The machine around her continued to run despite her obvious exhaustion. Her third album, Who's Sorry Now, came out in 1975. It was less country and more pop. Her brothers disapproved of Marie's desire to experiment with other styles. Her family blamed her for altering the recipe, and the album didn't do as well. She had to struggle for the freedom to select her own music at the age of 16. Marie wanted to expand, but her brothers and managers believed she was damaging the brand. She experienced the strain for years since it was so intense. She then claimed that she felt forced to decide between being her own artist and being loyal to her family. In 1975, she embarked on a Japanese tour. It was among the most significant events of her career. As if it were Beatlemania, fans fainted and yelled. Behind the scenes, Marie was collapsing, yet she needed police escorts to navigate the masses. She performed in more than 200 performances annually. Even for adults, such a schedule is cruel. It was intolerable for a teenager. She continued to strive to be a girl while working non-stop, traveling between nations, making records, and performing on television. Back then, there weren't many rules against child labor in the entertainment industry. Thus, nobody paused to inquire about her well-being. They simply continued. The money was too good. Marie Osmond had outlived most individuals twice her age by the time she was 16. She had been a public personality, a performer, a supplier, and a corporate asset. Beneath all the celebrity, however, was a girl who was never allowed to experience childhood. Something that had never been seen on television before occurred in January 1976. Donny Osmond and his sister Marie, both teenagers, were given the opportunity to perform on their own variety program. Donny was 18. Marie was only 16. When it aired on January 23, 1976, the ABC president awarded them a whole show after noticing their charisma during a guest role. There were around 14 million viewers. They continued to watch week after week. Donny performed rock music. Every show concluded with balloons dropping from the ceiling as Marie sang country. They sang May Tomorrow Be a Perfect Day. In an era when variety programs were already declining, they succeeded despite being the youngest hosts in history. However, there was something more darker hidden beneath all of that color in song. The suffering Marie was concealing behind her smile was invisible to others. Millions saw a happy adolescent, but she was working 18 hours a day and getting very little sleep. She still needed to get a tutor to help her study for school before going home to do chores. She was informed she was too fat by producers. She was only 103 pounds, and they threatened to cancel the concert unless she lost another 10 pounds. Marie began to go hungry. She weighed 93 pounds. She was unable to remain awake. She began to perceive her body in fictitious ways. They even dubbed her a fat pig while dragging her into parking lots. She suffered for decades as a result of this harm. The pressure continued to mount despite her best efforts to push through it. Her album, This Is the Way That I Feel, was released in 1977, but it was a failure. She got into arguments with her family and the producers because she wanted more influence over her songs. The Osmonds seized complete control of the show by the end of 1977, and they relocated the production from Los Angeles to Utah. Marie attempted to alter the manner of the presentation. She substituted disco-themed performances for the older music in order to give it a more contemporary vibe. The changes were disliked by several fans. The traditional rock and country elements that gave the performance its unique flavor were overlooked by others. But in a world that was always telling her what to do, she was attempting to find her voice. 1978 was a bad year. On set, Marie passed out. Her body had surrendered. She was tired and dehydrated. Her group attempted to conceal it. They made sure no one outside the studio knew and kept the media at bay. They could not jeopardize the clean image of the show. However, Marie was disintegrating. She did, however, appear. She gave a performance. She grinned because she felt that she needed to continue for her followers and her family. Despite receiving Emmy nominations in 1978, including one for the song Leading Lady, the show's ratings were declining. The network renamed the program The Osmond Family Show and shifted it to Sundays in 1979. It was unsuccessful. In May, the show was cancelled. Donnie married around the same time. Many of his young female fans stopped watching as a result. It was the end of the fairy tale. However, it was more than just a change of career for Marie. The years of starvation and condemnation had caused serious damage. She became prone to binge eating followed by days of fasting. Her metabolism never got back to normal. She was so horrified that she couldn't even look in the mirror. She made her acting debut in The Gift of Love, a Christmas television film, in 1978. She portrayed a wealthy orphan who develops feelings for a Swiss immigrant. Critics claimed she lacked the substance for serious acting, and James Woods played her fiancé, but the film failed to make a splash. She resumed her career in music and television, but her ambition to become a serious actress began to fade. She then tried Broadway in 1982. In a revival of The Sound of Music, she portrayed Maria, although the critiques were harsh. She was ripped apart by critics. The performance concluded early. She needed time away from the spotlight to recuperate. She was plagued by that failure for years. She didn't get much recognition until 1994, when she went back on tour in the role. She made her Broadway debut in The King and I in 1997. Although she lacked emotion, critics praised her voice for being robust. It was still a victory. It provided her with something she had long been lacking. Marie had a great resurgence in country music in 1985. After its July release, her album There's No Stopping Your Heart became an immediate hit. In the US and Canada, her duet with Dan Seals, Meet Me in Montana, peaked at number 1. Additionally, the title track hit a solo number 1. She hadn't had a solo chart topper since 1973 with Paper Roses. She started traveling after relocating her family to Nashville. She gave more than 300 performances annually. She played wherever they took her, even after trekking through cow pastures and having to scrape mud off her shoes. However, the effort paid off. It was a fresh start. She began something quite different in 1986. On QVC, she started creating and marketing porcelain dolls. It was more than a side project. Everything was under her control. Every design was her own creation. There were a lot of dolls sold. Within 15 minutes, one of them, which was modeled after her own mother, sold 3 million units. She created more than $500 over time. All of the money poured in. She made almost $50 million from it as it grew into a full-fledged commercial empire. She demonstrated that she had true business acumen, despite the claims that she was only using her reputation to boost her income. Her second album, Alan Love, was released in 1988. It was released in July after being recorded in March. Despite having a duet with Paul Davis and powerful vocals, it was a failure. the singles didn't do well in the charts. The album was overshadowed by tabloid news about her first divorce. Neither did her 1989 follow-up release. Her popularity in country music had peaked. She began doing more shows in Las Vegas in the late 1990s, but it wasn't until 2008 when something extraordinary occurred once more. She started a residency at the Flamingo Hotel with Donnie. It operated for 11 years, but no one anticipated it would endure. By the time it concluded in November 2019, they had performed 1,230 times. In the history of Vegas, it became the longest-running singing duo act. In addition to a portion of the ticket sales, they were each making over $1.5 million annually at one point. The Flamingo even changed the name of its theater to honor them. It was an emotional last night. The audience joined in their tears as they performed their well-known farewell song. She took a bold step in 2001. She wrote a book on her battle with postpartum depression titled Behind the Smile. She felt as though she was vanishing after giving birth to her seventh child. She experienced physical aches, depressing thoughts, and panic attacks. She left her children behind and drove out one night without informing anyone where she was. Her spouse persuaded her to rest at a motel. Thousands of people wrote to her to share their own suffering after she discussed it on Oprah. The book sparked a national dialogue regarding postpartum depression. She made it acceptable to discuss something that nobody wanted to acknowledge. At the age of 48, she participated in Dancing with the Stars in 2007. She finished third, which was surprisingly good. However, the moment she fainted live on television is what most people remember. It took place immediately following a dance. The screen became black as she fell. Her initial reaction upon awakening was, "Oh crap, I fainted on live TV." She then inquired about her scores. Millions of people saw her as even more human after that moment. She started working with Nutrisystem that same year. She became their ambassador for almost 10 years after losing 50 pounds. She made millions from the agreement. She used it to candidly discuss her weight issues, which had plagued her since she was 14 years old. She claimed that the treatment made her body love her in return. Losing weight was not the only goal. It has to do with recovery. She became a co-host of the chat show The Chat in 2019. She related very intimate tales, such as how years of back agony led her to decide to get breast reduction surgery. She claimed that when she portrayed Maria in The Sound of Music, her breasts were the only topic of conversation. After just one season, she exited the show in 2020. After raising 8 children, she and her husband were finally alone for the first time since 1982. Marie Osmond believed that a lovely eternity was about to begin as she was married for the first time in 1982. She married basketball player Stephen Craig in front of 4,000 guests at a Mormon temple when she was barely 22 years old. They welcomed their son, Stephen James Craig, into the world in April 1983. However, things began to fall apart more quickly than anyone had anticipated. The couple's marriage ended in October 1985. Marie said there had been mental mistreatment and sought for divorce. It was considerably more difficult behind the scenes. She was attempting to juggle her roles as a well-known entertainer and a new mother. The pressure was tremendous. According to friends, Stephen was unable to cope with the constant attention that accompanied Marie's celebrity. The subtle tie that will eventually reunite them after many years would be their son. Marie remarried in 1986, this time to Brian Bloyle, a music producer. They spent 21 years together. 5 of their 7 children were adopted, and 2 were biological. On the outside, it appeared to be a large, happy family, but on the inside, things were very gloomy. Following the birth of her son Matthew in July 1999, Marie experienced a terrifying depressive episode. She felt completely different. Her thoughts would race, her body would tremble, and she genuinely thought her kids would be better off without her. One day, she gave the infant a credit card, left her with a babysitter, and drove away along the California coast. She vanished for 3 days without knowing where she was heading. Her spouse had to use the phone to find her. Scared and shattered, she landed up in a motel. She used Zoloft, a medicine prescribed by doctors, for 5 years, but she detested how it left her feeling completely depressed. Not happy, but not sad either. On February 26, 2010, she experienced the most agonizing anguish of her life. Michael, her 18-year-old adopted son, leaped from his Los Angeles apartment complex. He had been suffering from depression for a while, particularly following the 2007 divorce of Marie and Brian. He had tried treatment while in his first year of fashion school, but he felt totally isolated. Marie was tormented by the words he spoke to her just days before he passed away: "I have no friends." She was too familiar with that sensation. Brian, his father, did not attend his funeral. Before he died, Michael had changed his last name from Blossel to Brian since his siblings didn't want him there. Then an astonishing event occurred. Marie remarried Stephen Craig, her first husband, on May 4, 2011, precisely 29 years after their initial marriage. It seemed like a complete circle. The fact that Marie discovered her 1982 wedding gown, concealed in an old box in her garage 5 days prior to the marriage, added to the magic. A new dress she had already purchased didn't feel quite right. Nor was the date she picked arbitrary. Both her late son Michael and her mother Olive were born on May 4. Marie expressed her desire for both of them to be present in spirit. Before the wedding, she and Stephen had been having a covert relationship for 2 years in case things didn't work out. They had a modest reception at home after getting married in a Mormon temple in Las Vegas. She used it as a means of recovery. It was not in 2001 that she had the worst day of her depression. It took place shortly after Matthew's birth in 1999. Her age was 40. She was unable to get out of bed or raise her arms because her body was so overloaded. She believed she would never return, so she drove away from her family for 3 days. According to doctors, it was severe stress. She talked out about her suicide thoughts and how lost she felt in her 2001 book Behind the Smile, which was inspired by that traumatic event. When Marie stood out for her gay daughter Jessica in 2009, it upset a lot of people in her Catholic community. "Jessica is a wonderful woman who deserves equal rights," she stated on the Los Angeles radio. To the ire of many Orthodox Mormon followers, she even went to Jessica's wedding. She was criticized, humiliated, and accused of violating her religious beliefs. Marie didn't give up, though. Everyone should have civil rights, she argued. Although her remarks had great impact, they deeply polarized her church and fan following. Silently, too, her body suffered. Marie had suffered severe knee pain after years of performing on stage. She reportedly fell and chipped off a piece of her kneecap while performing in Las Vegas. Injuries accumulated over years. She had many knee surgery in 2015, but she kept them to herself. She simply continued to perform. The pressure to be flawless and never display weakness was so great. However, in her 2001 book, she revealed her darkest secret. She disclosed that during her teenage years in the 1970s, she had experienced sexual abuse. Not a friend or relative, but someone with a stake in her career did it. She claimed that she lived in fear and felt intimidated. It altered her self-perception. Because guys made her feel ill, she said that the trauma was so severe that it led her to believe she was gay. She battled self-worth and body image for years. One of the main causes of her difficult later years was the abuse. She eventually talked about the body shaming she experienced at the age of 15 in 2023. She weighed 103 pounds and stood 5 feet 5 inches. However, she was dragged into a KTLA parking lot by a producer who informed her she was obese and embarrassing. She was crushed by it. She began starving herself before tapings after that because she was afraid of seeming unprofessional. She struggled with body dysmorphia for decades as a result of that humiliation. She then made an appearance on a podcast with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson in March 2024. But instead of discussing her early years, everyone's attention was drawn to her face. Despite being 64, she appeared to be a totally different person, according to many. She was accused of overdoing the plastic surgery. Images of the 1970s and 2024 side by side went viral. The internet was cruel. People bombarded her sites with nasty remarks and accused her of being a fraud. The story didn't end there. Marie eventually answered in 2025. She denied having major procedures like a facelift, but she acknowledged that she had back discomfort and had undergone breast reduction surgery and Botox and laser treatments. Nevertheless, after examining her pictures, specialists concluded that her neck and jawline had changed significantly. Her skin appeared significantly tighter than anticipated in a 2022 video for Nutrisystem. Marie felt as though people had forgotten who she truly was since the urge to always seem young had taken over the conversation. She felt she had had enough by April 2025. She declared on Instagram that she was taking a break from social media in order to spend more time with her family. 9 months had passed since she last logged on. She claimed that she was worn down by the criticism of her appearance and background. She just wanted calm at 65. "I've always tried to listen to my heart," she remarked. Her heart was suddenly urging her to disconnect and spend time with the ones who really mattered. Marie was finally making the decision to defend herself after enduring so much loss, suffering, and condemnation.